What?
There's a restaurant. I came up, I saw it was nice. Grocery store.
Actually,
My job.
I go to the
February 19th.
that way.
For sure.
Later. Now we can hear.
I know, so I saw there was this.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the Planning Board meeting of June 21st, 2022. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. Let me introduce the other members. Down at my extreme left is Doug Braskin. Next to Doug Von Dugan. Then Peter Goodwin. Mike Hodder is the vice chairman. To my right, John Thurston, and Brad Harriman, who is the representative from the Board of Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs, our alternate. We don't have any public hearings tonight, so the first item under discussion items will be the appointment of Bob Lohman to the CIP committee. Bob has worked with CIP for several years, is a very good member. And so if anybody has any questions, if not, if somebody's willing to make a motion.
I move that the board appoint Bob Lohman to the CIP committee for the year 2022.
Okay, thank you. I'll second that motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, on to the next item. Short-term rental committee. Mike and John and I have had some conversations about this issue, and we thought that it might be good if the three of us could get together and bring some proposals back to the planning board for your discussion. Does anybody have any issues with that? Is that all right with everyone? We think that it's important for us to at least discuss what we think the next step should be, in addition to the definition we've already developed. So everybody's okay with that?
Did we decide on a definition?
Yeah, yes, we did, yeah. And that's not going anyplace. This is just in addition.
So,
Okay.
I'm assuming the definition, I'm sorry I wasn't here last meeting, of course. So I saw in the definition it was, I believe, a period of 1 month or 31 days, whichever is less. Is that right?
Yeah, 31 days or a month, whichever is less, yes. I think so, yes. Yes.
So in the accessory ADU document I see here, it says that neither the single-family home nor the ADU shall be rented or inhabited for periods of 1 month or 31 days. It doesn't say less than or more than. It just says it shall not be rented for that period. So it wasn't clear to me what the definition should be.
Oh, okay, well, it does need to say less than. It does?
It ends with the words,
Yeah.
whichever is
Right,
less.
yeah.
Doesn't that cover it?
Well, again, it's not clear. It says it should not be inhabited. Let's use the less, which might be 1 month in the case of February. It shall not be inhabited for a period of 1 month. But what if it was 3 weeks?
Can't be.
It could be inhabited for 3 weeks. That's not 1 month.
Actually, the definition that I have is that the use of a residential unit for rental occupancy of 31 days, 1 month, whichever is less, is the definition of a short-term rental. So there are many places in town that are not short-term rentals, but that the occupants are there for 2 weeks. So I think the definition needs to be very clear that a short-term rental is the rental occupancy of a residential unit for a period of 1 month or 31 days, whichever is less.
Do you have a proposal to enhance or change that definition in item number 7?
Well, going to the next item with ADU on the third page of the red line, it says specifically, neither the single-family home nor the ADU shall be rented or inhabited for periods of 1 month or 31 days, whichever is less.
That's the language I was looking at.
So it might be, shall be rented for periods of 1 month or 31 days, because there are many single-family homes in Wolfeboro that are inhabited for less, but are not, in fact, short-term rentals. So I would go back to my original position that 7 probably should refer to neither the single-family home nor the ADU shall be utilized as a short-term rental, and that way the controlling definition would be short-term rental.
You're grinding very fine. What would you suggest as revised language?
Well, to move to the next item under ADU discussion, my recommendation would be neither the single-family home nor the ADU shall be utilized as a short-term rental, or used as a short-term rental, because the key with used is use.
So simply forbid the use altogether as an STR.
For either the single-family home or an ADU, yes.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get to that then.
We'll get to that, yes.
Okay, does that?
No, so my concern, though, is that it specifies a period of, in this case, 1 month, but it doesn't say 1 month or less. So somebody could rent it for 2 weeks, for example.
What language are you looking at?
Again, number 7.
7, but it says whichever is less.
Well, whichever is less of the 2 options there, 1 month or 31 days.
Oh, okay, I get it. So the idea is you have to either rent it for 1 month or 31 days, or year-round.
Or longer.
Or longer.
Or
yes.
longer than a month or 31 days.
But the question is, what happens if somebody utilizes, so we're looking for so if 7 is simply changed to refer to short-term rental, that alleviates it. What then has to come back is a definition of short-term rental that is for any period of time up to 31 days or 1 month, whichever is less.
Yes, that's, I think, is
That
better.
we have.
Yeah, that's a better choice.
That's not what, I understand how this could be read differently. So when we get to ADU 7, I'm going to recommend that go to short-term rental, and then we make sure the short-term rental definition is solid.
Okay.
Okay,
So we should
all
move on.
right, so Tavis, do you want to go through the changes to the accessory dwelling unit?
So what I did at the request of the board, you have 2 documents that should be exactly the same, other than the format. So the first is the existing accessory dwelling unit language in black with strike through, underline, et cetera, as the track changes. And then you have a quote-unquote clean document, which previously said for discussion only at the top. In order to do this, I have to admit I had to go back to the original and rebuild the track change. And then the second document is essentially accepting all of the track changes. So functionally from the last meeting, nothing really changed in this other than the discussion on F7.
Which is where we are now.
Which is where we are now, correct.
So that said, I had one additional question on it, and maybe it's a fine point, but in, let's see, it's E.
Sorry, E7.
In E1I, where it says, "Structure shall be located to the side of and behind the front facade of the existing home." Has any consideration been given to the possibility that the front facade of the home may not face the street? Or is that how the front facade is defined? Because I have a house in my neighborhood where his front door faces away from the street.
I would defer to the planning board as further authorized to grant waivers to the requirements of this paragraph E.
That would cover it.
So that, I mean, that is a very specific nuance. Typically, in Wolfeboro, the house or home is addressed off the street providing frontage. It's not a requirement.
Oh, and in this case, the house is addressed off the street providing frontage. In fact, it's a dead-end street.
So it's on the corner?
No,
Oh.
I can think of some side-loaded houses.
no, this is not side-loaded. It faces back.
Oh,
It's as if you took a house, normal house, where the front door faces the street and rotated it 180 degrees. So the front door faces directly away from the street. It's a very peculiar arrangement, and it's a one-off, and maybe we don't need to worry about it. But I just wanted to bring up a possibility.
well, there are some that face the side lot line, too.
To me, the intent of this is to make the structure itself subordinate.
Yes, I agree.
So I think as long as in a future world, the planning board could determine that the proposed new structure was subordinate to the existing, that would be the premise of this.
Yeah, and I think if the exceptions are so unusual that waiver provision would allow us to accommodate them if necessary. And this language would accommodate most of the houses in town.
Right.
Or would it just be simpler to say that structure should be located to the side of and behind the wall parallel to the street,
Or facing the street, because they're not always
or
parallel.
facing the street? Which therefore says you could have the front door on the side of the building rather than, because that's where my driveway is and that's where my parking lot is, that's where I want people to come in. But if it was related to the relationship of the building to the street rather than the front of the house.
Well, to build on what Tavis had to say, this is kind of suggesting to those who read it and abide by it that the structure is architecturally and physically supposed to be subordinate to the main house and the location and layout of the main house.
Because if you think in the instance of a corner lot, there is a front facing both streets regardless of where the front door is. So the idea is to get the structure back and behind. This language was taken almost verbatim out of the village residential district that says that garage doors are to be behind that front plane. And there may be instances, quite honestly, where it makes sense to put the front door facing the same way and almost in the same plane.
Julie? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
she
we've got one
had a question.
on F4, there's still one too many words. It says no ADU shall not exceed. F4.
Gotcha.
Too many no-nos.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
I think
Okay.
it's
So
reading a lot better.
with those, I mean, let's see, discussion on type of structure, F4 is a typo. 7, perhaps going to, no, neither the single-family home nor ADU shall be utilized as a short-term rental.
Is that the language you're proposing? I'm annotating my copy. Shall be utilized as a short-term rental.
I think that's easiest, yes. Or occupied. I leave it to the board, either occupied or utilized. To me, they're synonymous with the intent.
Pretty much. Utilize goes to the use.
Correct. I like utilized.
I prefer utilize. I'd suggest the board go for utilize.
So next steps with this would be for the board to have a dialogue on when to have a public forum, if you're ready to go to that point.
Right, okay, well, we also have definitions that go directly with this, that,
Correct.
You know, some data for
Okay.
us coming up, that you're trying to gather, some data on
right, yeah.
lots and so forth?
I want to have that ready for the Monday meeting, yes.
Can I interject some additional wrinkles before we go any further to presenting this to public hearing? As the board asked, I canvassed towns around the lake. You all have a copy of the write-up that I did. Of the 4 towns, only 1 didn't return my call. Figured I wouldn't pursue them. I got good information from the other 3. You've read them, you know what they say. Draw your attention to Angela's comments, town planner for Meredith. Meredith is our sister city on the lake, our biggest competitor for economic dollars from the tourists. She points out that they have some lots in their town, 5 acres, 10 acres in size. And they were concerned that allowing an ADU detached, without specifying how close it had to be to the principal structure, would allow the homeowner to build his ADU 6 acres down the road. So she included in her Meredith ordinances a requirement that the ADU detached has to be within 120 feet of the primary residence. She recommended that to Wolfeboro. I throw that out for discussion.
That actually makes a lot of sense because the lots like what I have were 100 feet from each other. So that would mean that that little bitty cottage would look like it's just another one in the line.
Yeah, I think when we thought about ADUs, we all thought that they would be like within
Right,
visible distance of the primary structure. But there are lots in town where the ADU could be 2, 3, or more acres away from the primary structure.
Here, remember that fellow that was in here that was talking about that? He wanted to put it like way at the end of his 5-acre lot.
Yeah, and so does the board want to have a
yeah, how do you all feel?
distance requirement?
I think having a distance requirement makes sense. 120 feet is very close.
Okay.
But not too close.
Well, it may be. It's only 40 yards, as Peter just pointed out.
40 yards.
Half a football field.
Yeah,
That's less than half a football field.
That's not really close.
I think that's reasonably close, and the idea is that in some ways we're trying to encourage people to have these, and if it was, you know, more than half a football field, maybe 80 yards, it might be more palatable for people. I mean, some of the reasons that they're trying to keep those people slightly separate from our people, and 40 yards is not very far.
Whose people are our people? I'm sorry.
Well, it's the homeowner wants to have the people who are renting this ADU separate from them.
They don't want to feel like people are in the same yard.
They don't want people in the same yard. What does the board,
Yeah.
Meredith feels 120 feet is good. What does the board feel?
Okay, so that's the suggestion Mike is making, that we consider the 120 feet.
I'm suggesting that we consider some kind of a distance limitation, whether it's 120 feet or 4 feet ball fields away, or whatever it might happen to be.
I would agree.
It's up to the board to decide. I have no dog in the fight for 120 feet.
Okay, so how do the rest of you feel then?
I don't have a strong feeling about any particular distance. So in most cases, I think it'll be limited by the lot size.
Well, isn't the lot size 100 feet for us small guys and sort of closer to town?
I'm sorry?
Isn't the lot size, lot frontage 100 feet? For the, not downtown residential, but the next little residential out, isn't it 100 feet?
It varies.
It varies.
I'll draw the board's attention to, sorry, Julie, I didn't mean to interrupt, to the 2 points in Meredith's experience. Angela felt they may have as many as 100 or more detached ADUs permitted so far. And there has been, which I think might be an exaggeration, but nonetheless, and there's been no public resistance to their ADU regulation. So 120 feet has sat comfortably with Meredith to the point where they have a lot of applications and built ADUs.
The only point I'll bring up is if you have a scenario where there's an existing farmhouse and an existing barn, and they're 121 feet apart, I don't know if the board would necessarily be opposed.
Absolutely not.
But, so the question is, would that be something in paragraph E that could be waived if there were such a distance, or would it be something that the board would be more comfortable with a variance being required?
With something with what?
A variance being required? If
No,
it,
absolutely not.
I'm-
In my opinion, absolutely not, because otherwise you get another board involved.
Again, I don't have a dog in the fight as to whether it's 120 feet or 300 feet. It's just, if there is a distance,
These are being, if there is a distance limitation, it should be within paragraph F, subject to conditional approval, or wherever conditional approval.
Correct.
That's paragraph E. So we can waive it if necessary.
It does kind of go with what everybody's been talking about, having it just behind the other house and just the side of the house, which says it should be closer to me rather than way out in left field.
Yeah, I agree.
so perhaps, just another way of thinking of it, instead of looking at a set distance, maybe the said distance is no more than 1/2 the existing lot frontage. So if you have a 200-foot frontage, it has to be within 100 feet.
Well, we have some lots up in the boonies, which are 700-plus feet frontage.
So arguably, half that distance would be less than required for a lot, therefore it would still arguably appear visually subordinate.
350 feet distant?
Does it
Out
sound
of
well?
700, it's pretty close, because a traditional home would have to be 700 feet away, give or take setback. That's where I'm going with that.
All right, well, to continue where you're going. Let me appeal to your professionalism. You see where the board is considering a distance limitation. What do you suggest?
Half the frontage.
Back up a sentence, you just said something about 750 feet, what?
No, if the
hypothetical.
required frontage of a lot is 200 feet, then 100 feet is closer than would be allowed by law for a freestanding structure, factoring in setbacks and everything else. So if you went to 50% of the existing frontage, or 50% of the frontage required by the base zoning district, you'd still be twice as close as what the ordinance calls for each individual home.
Are we looking at the required frontage?
That, I gave two options. One,
That was the second option.
Yeah. Well,
either 50% of the existing, i.e. established, or 50% of the lot requirement in the zone. So the lot might require 400 feet of frontage, but the existing lot might be 100 feet, so you'd be within 50 feet. Because mathematically speaking, I mean, nobody puts the house in the middle of the lot, but presumably the lot is regimented at the minimum frontage requirement. So holding the detached ADU to 1/2 that would be twice as close as otherwise permitted by the zone. At least to me, seems plausible under mathematics.
Forget mathematics. What about practicality? What is it going to look like in the town?
It's
Okay,
gonna-
other thoughts from
it's
other
gonna-
members?
I think that's when the data comes in and you see your lots and you see the size of your lots, you can tell how close these buildings are going to be close to each other. When you look at the size of the lots that are out there that are built on, because those are the lots that are going to be used for the ADU. So Mike, when you talked to the lady from Meredith, did she say no short-term rentals were allowed in that?
Yeah.
So did she give you any framework on how they police that?
The same way we do.
By complaints by neighbors?
We have a code enforcement officer just like they do, and he picks up the telephone when someone calls and says, hey, look what I heard.
Okay.
Okay, other thoughts?
Well, my thinking is 120 feet which is what, 40 yards, is too short. I would say that more than 100 yards is too long. And if you ended up saying 200 feet, which is in the middle, that would end up making sense to me. And, you know, so it gives the yard sort of your own private yard.
Well, the idea behind my thinking was half of what would ordinarily be required by the regulation. Therefore, it implies it's incidental and subordinate. So there's a key in between the existing condition and the proposed condition. So if a structure is twice as close as it would otherwise be permitted by the ordinance, that supposes it's incidental. Most people don't put their garage 140 yards away from their home. That's a long walk in February. A garage is clearly an incidental and subordinate use to the single-family home.
And I think the goal here is to make sure that it appears subordinate to the primary residence.
And not as a standalone.
Not as a
right?
standalone. So if you use something, as Tavis suggested, which is proportional to the lot size, then perhaps would be more flexible, if you will.
I think proportional to the either existing house on its lot or the required lot size, because imagine if you had 1,200 feet of frontage, it'd be quite far. But nothing goes over 400 feet, I think.
But even at 1,200 feet, if something were at 600 feet and the required frontage is 1,200 feet, it's still twice as close as what you would, I mean, because zoning is about the regular, predictable development within the zone. So if something is half the distance, it clearly must be incidental to the primary.
Is 400 our largest minimum frontage requirement?
That sounds right, but I can't be quoted on that.
I think it is.
Right.
So that would be 200 would be the
200
furthest.
would be the max, right. So you could put the distance at 200.
I mean, if you ended up having a very strange lot that has 1,200 feet of frontage, you could literally, if you're doing it only half the distance, you could have something that's a football field and a half away. So that's basically a new house on the lot.
What I would suggest, in addition to, I mean, I think my formal recommendation would be if you were looking at a distance restriction, you put in no more than 50% of the existing street frontage. Because there are many lots in town which are nowhere close to what the zone requires right now. There are many 50-foot lots where 250 feet is required.
Sure.
So you don't want to end up having to grant a waiver because somebody already has 50 feet. At the same time, you don't want somebody having a detached structure that's right next to. So it might be at least 20 feet, which is what you require in manufactured housing developments. At least 20 feet, but not more than 50% of the existing lot frontage.
Okay, John,
So
go ahead.
when you keep talking about this, I keep thinking about the amount of asphalt and surface area and everything that you're creating to get to this unit, wherever it is. If you make it further away, there's more asphalt and more surface area, more runoff, and if you're near the lake, that's just going in the lake. So if you keep them closer to the existing dwelling, like attached, then you minimize that and you shrink it down, and then you've got a smaller footprint. It only makes more environmental sense to me.
Well, you already can't have, under this proposed regulation, any detached ADU within 300 feet of the water, and I don't understand the correlation between a detached ADU and more asphalt.
Your suggestion of it being a longer distance away increases that stormwater surface area in all areas of the town. It just adds up. If it's closer, then there's less impervious surface. Just something to think about.
Driveways and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that both units, both the ADU and the primary, share the same driveway.
Yeah.
That's the assumption, right?
Well, I'm just saying the further away it gets, the more surface area that you have.
So a barn that's 300 feet away has more surface area than a barn that's 20 feet away?
No, I'm just saying, if you're going to construct something and you're looking at proposing an ordinance and you want to say, what's our range from the existing structure, and you increase that area out a certain distance, that's all impervious surface that you've added to that lot coverage area.
Yeah,
If
you
you
can
keep,
use that same argument against any form of construction in the town, can't you?
I'm just pointing it out, that's all I'm saying.
Brad, did you
But you'd
wanna-
still be restricted by percent of lot coverage also, so.
Okay, Brad, did you have any?
Yeah, a couple comments here. I like the idea of, like Mike brought back, of having a distance established there. Listen to Tavis talk, with 400 feet being the maximum frontage, we think, not quoting anyway. I think 200-foot number would be a reasonable number to use. I would also like to think that we would put this under, was it E? So that it would be subject to the waiver
Right.
portion, so that if somebody has an existing barn that's 210 feet away, they're not precluded from, being able to convert that. Or else have something in the ordinance too that says that if there's an existing structure that they want to convert over that's outside of that, distance away, that they'd be able to, which, if we have it under the waivers portion, that would take care of it anyway. But I just wanted to make sure that we had that option to be able to utilize an existing building on
I think
the
my
site.
suggestion, if the board wants to move forward with this, would be to put it under E1A, so the distance only applies to new construction. So if you had an existing structure that was 300 feet away.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I would support Brad's idea. 200 feet sounds like a good idea to me, too. Half the maximum likely distance of the frontage
Okay,
On the-
and
on the
put
lot.
it for the new constructions.
Well,
On new construction.
Okay,
so in the case of the barn, let's say, or converting an old chicken house or whatever you have, that would eliminate that possibility.
It would eliminate the need for a waiver to the distance requirement. It still doesn't address John's point about potentially adding impervious, but I think both A and B, under the conditional use permit and what the board, I think if the regulation is as clear as it can be without going into the weeds on every ism, if it's clear as it can be on what the intent is, we want it close, not too far, we want it to look incidental and subordinate behind the existing single-family home, then the board is well guided in its consideration of a waiver request.
So do we agree on a 200-foot?
well, I think so.
Say?
Under, and you're saying under A1A,
E1A somewhere.
It would probably be
1A, right.
1A 4, just so that notice of decision stays down at the
Yeah,
end.
okay.
It'd be a new 4, and then it'd be 5, and 5 would become 6. I guess my only concern with hitting the static number of 200 is if you have a 50-foot lot and you say that someone can put it, this is back to John's point to a degree, if all of a sudden somebody has a 50-foot wide but very deep lot, is it appropriate to put a detached ADU 200 feet behind?
No, that's the maximum, not the
Correct.
minimum.
Right,
But
yeah.
it's looking at the equation the other way. So would it be appropriate to put something 200 feet behind it and be the only anomalous structure that far back in the neighborhood?
But that's the maximum.
That's the maximum. It could be
So it's
right,
probably
could be
30
right
feet
behind
away.
it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem unless it was going 200 feet closer and therefore right abutting a lake shore or a stream,
Okay.
which of course then has its own
I'm just
restrictions.
trying to throw out where this might go.
And we're not allowing them in the shorefront residential.
Right,
Correct.
right.
At this point.
No, I think Tavis's point is that if it's on the narrow lot and 200 feet behind the primary structure, does it have a potential then for being less than 200 feet from a structure on an adjoining lot? And therefore looking subordinate to the neighbor's house, for example.
If you think of Port Wedland, now most of the, because that's where the committee heard that there were a number of potential things to look at. Most of those lots are not deep enough to have the structure 200 feet behind the home. However, if somebody went and put it all the way against the rear setback line, it arguably would appear on the next
Well,
lot.
we're not allowing them within the setbacks.
No, correct, but they could
Yeah.
push it all the way to the rear of the lot, 20 feet off the rear line.
No,
So to John's point, if the idea is now there's going to be an extra driveway, now you've taken the driveway and added 150 feet of impervious. I guess what I'm trying to, I guess not using the right words. If you're thinking of creating a cluster on a parcel, maybe there's a detached garage, maybe there's a chicken coop, maybe there's a detached ADU. What I'm hearing the board lean to is the preference that the structures be in a concentrated area on the lot.
Yeah, that they'd be
Yeah,
architectural.
right.
but I want to hold that thought that Tavis just mentioned there about Port Woodland and the small lots. You know, what's really concerning is when somebody goes to put that ADU on a small lot, it's where the runoff is going to go. It's going to go onto the neighbor's property, because these small lots only can absorb so much area, and then when you put more buildings and build them up around the foundation and the driveways, you push the water to the neighbor's property. A lot of these lots aren't even made to have more than one structure on them. I mean, that's a big concern. I don't know if you've taken it in consideration or not.
Well, we have, because these are allowed by conditional use permit, and one of the requirements in a conditional use permit is the neighborhood impact. So we would be able to hold their feet to the fire if we could show that the runoff was going to go onto the neighbor's lot.
Which arguably is a market step above somebody that simply wants to go to pick a box store, buy a shed, and put it in exactly the same spot. At least with the ADU, you have some control over site impact that you wouldn't otherwise have with an accessory structure.
Let me point something out. We've been talking about 200 feet, 400 feet, 120 feet. It's pretty obvious to me that the number, we're pulling a number out of the hat. It's kind of arbitrary. We have no experience. I would suggest that Meredith's experience, 100-plus ADU applications, no public resistance, 120 feet, it's the only hard information that we have of a number that actually works in practice. Just throwing it out there.
What are their lot sizes? I'm not
I
asking.
think that frankly is irrelevant.
I don't.
I know you don't, but I'm just my opinion. I think it's frankly irrelevant, because if we were to tailor regulations to lot sizes specifically, this ADU regulation might be 5 or 6 pages long and have specific recommendations for each zone in the town. And I think we can't write a zoning ordinance that way, John.
I think if the lot sizes, I mean, this is my only scapegoat in this game here. I don't favor the detached ADU, but again, I think if they're on larger lots or the lots can handle the impact, I mean, then I see something that the lot can handle. Again, that's where I see the impact. I don't support the premise, but small lots don't handle the impact for the community. They just don't. Larger lots would handle the impact.
I guess the only reason I suggested utilizing 50% of the existing frontage is simply that there's a proportional relationship between the distance the neighborhood has already been planned or zoned to allow for structures, and by requiring it to be less than half that distance, it implies that the structure is subordinate. I don't doubt that 120 feet is a valid number for Meredith.
Okay, well, according to what we have now, the parcel shall meet the minimum lot size. So whoever was concerned about that, it's.
Correct.
that's
Yeah,
a-
and in addition, the essence of the detached ADU regulation is to make sure that it is somehow subordinate architecturally to the existing structure, which suggests to me closer is better.
I have thought of your lot frontage regulation, and My question would be that if you had 800 feet there, you could now put it 400 feet. Well, if the depth of your lot was 400 feet, you could put it basically at the back boundary, which therefore would be an issue for your wetland issue lots. And so I guess hearing you talk and hearing Mike talk, I would end up then suggesting that maybe 120 is too small. 150 probably would be just fine. And it is not terribly different from Meredith, so it probably should fly.
You're coming down from.
I'm coming down,
Pretty soon it'll be attached.
What business with this man now?
What bid do you have, you know?
So
But
Peter,
I
are you
think that,
drawing a
your regulation doesn't work, because you could put it to the back line rather than parallel to the road.
Well, remember, you could put any accessory structure all the way to the back setback line.
Right, but not an ADU.
Correct.
So,
And
Peter,
so-
are you drawing a circle around the house at 150 feet? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. It has to be closer than that. And
But behind the front facade,
behind the
so.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so-
in hearing all this, I'm kind of at a spot where I'm just trying to hear what the board is saying. This is not personal preference.
Oh, okay,
50% of the existing frontage or the base zoning district minimum, whichever is less, would be the
Okay.
maximum.
I'll
Mike
second
Mike
Pete.
and Peter seem to agree to
Well, I
the,
haven't agreed yet.
well, I thought you just was patting him on the back.
No, I was saying we had a horse trading going on, but I was about
Okay.
to second his suggestion of 150 feet. So now you can say that I'm saying so.
Okay, all right, well, gosh, I'm sorry.
Well, we have to be careful. What is it, parliamentary
Right.
discipline here?
Okay, so anybody object to 150 feet before we,
Yes. I think there needs to be a minimum. I think for consistency with the remaining elements of the zoning regulations, regardless of detached ADUs, there is a constant theme that if there are multiple residential structures on a property, they have to be at least 20 feet apart, but not more than 150 feet apart.
fine. Add that,
Yeah, or attach it.
or attached.
But if it's attached, then
I
it's
know.
yeah, right,
completely different.
attached, it doesn't make any difference, right?
Different chapter.
So my suggestion would be E1A, new 4, proposed ADU structure shall be at least 20 feet, but not more than 150 feet from the existing single-family home, period. Read number 5 to 6.
Where are you again?
E,
That's fine, but why do you need a minimum distance?
E1,
Seriously?
Fire is one of the usual issues.
where an accessory sidewalk.
But, if you have sheet
Those
rock,
will slide down.
Oh, in there, okay.
you can do.
my suggestion is a minimum distance, so it's a visual separate structure. I mean, we could get into the same discussion whether that should be 5 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet, or...
I'll hold up the Meredith example again, and I'm not carrying any water for them within 120 feet of the primary structure. That's their language, within 120 feet.
That's fine. So is the board okay if somebody wants a structure
No, not in
right next to
February.
the other one?
Not in February with snow coming off a roof.
They
Uh-uh.
don't seem to care.
They may not.
What do we?
They may not have worried about it when they made the regulation.
Or
Clearly,
she may
if you
not have
don't
said
want
the
the
second
ADU
sentence.
in the structure or build an addition that becomes an ADU, you want some sort of separation. I'm just throwing it out for thought. If the board doesn't care, there's,
Mike, she may have
Okay,
answered
well,
just your question and not the rest of the paragraph.
Okay, there is there a motion?
No, we're just talking.
Oh,
at this
okay, well,
stage,
you
so-
started to make a motion.
No, I was seconded in quotation marks.
Okay, well, yes, all
It wasn't a
right.
motion yet.
He thought it might be a good
Okay, all
idea.
I think physically speaking, and Vaughn probably knows this better than I do, if the two structures are within 3 feet of each other, it's going to become a fire code issue.
Well, then we don't have to worry about it. It's a fire code issue.
Right,
I'm just, I'm trying to figure out where the sense of the board is as to what the
Well, that's what I
relationship
was
between
trying
the
to
two
do
structures is.
also.
What's that?
I said that's what I was trying to do also.
Yeah.
So just to give an example, in Wolfeboro, there will be an addition over a garage that is within 3 feet of the adjacent garage, and the fire department is requiring that that whole wall be fire rated,
So it's allowable as long
allowable. And we're spending $3,000 on units, window units, because they have to have a fusible link so that it will shut if it's warm or hot. Yes.
Yes, under building and fire code, generally speaking, there's a way to do anything you want.
So what,
Generally speaking.
minimum of 25 feet, maximum of 150 feet?
I said 20 and 150, but either way. 20, I'm pulling, because there's a separate issue before the town with manufactured units, and it's very clear in that zone that units need to be 20 feet apart. So at some point, the town agreed that 20 feet apart was a good distance for separate living facilities on the same parcel. That's where the 20 came from. There's nothing magic about that
And
for
if
me.
that's also part of the other regulations, I think that's a good way to start.
Yeah.
a lovely
right,
number.
Right, yeah, I agree.
Motion?
Yes.
I'd be happy to move that the board insert into the proposed ADU accessory dwelling units to detached section E1A4, distance limitations, minimum of 20 feet, maximum of 150 feet. The wording to be supplied by the planner.
Okay, somebody want to second that?
Second,
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstain?
Oh. Okay, thanks, John. Okay, so Tavis, it's now up to you to sort of wordsmith this, to come up with,
One further wrinkle.
right,
Again, back to the example of Meredith. They allow detached ADUs in all zones. They do not prohibit them in shorefront residential.
But they also put a hotel in the lake.
I'm just saying, something for us to consider, because right now we don't allow them.
I think that's
for both
fine.
language.
For practical purposes, there's no difference between an ADU or anything else you would be currently allowed to put in the shorefront residential as long as you comply with the % coverage. It only came to this board's attention is that the public may be more receptive to detached ADUs if they were precluded in shorefront and municipal watershed.
That was my suggestion, but practically speaking, from our sister town, quote unquote, no resistance to allowing them in the SFR.
Do we have any idea how many of the 100, quote unquote, they have in the shorefront residential?
She says that most of them are from second home owners, so I would assume that a substantial number of the detached ADUs are in the shorefront, which is where the second home owners tend to want to have second homes.
The only thing I would add to that is there are a number of shorefront residentially zoned properties that have existing bunkhouses that would perhaps entertain the idea of converting the existing coverage of the bunkhouse to an ADU, functionally not creating any impact in shoreland. But it was discussed by this board not to go into shorefront.
it was discussed, I'm sorry.
The board discussed not allowing detached ADUs in shorefront
Right, that's right.
with
we
the
did.
first step of detached ADUs.
When this goes for public hearing, if that really comes up, we can, talk about it and change the mind.
Personally, I think it's going to be an easier sell if we keep them out of the shorefront residential. But that may change based on the reception in the public hearing. So
Okay.
no additional, no
yeah.
changes to the,
No changes to that then? All right,
good.
I will make some changes based on tonight's discussion and return, at which point you can think about a forum unless there are other changes.
okay, before you bring this back to us, can you have our attorney look at this to make sure that,
Absolutely.
And get us something in writing, that she has reviewed it.
You are worried, aren't you?
Let's see, and also, I had suggested that we need to talk to Dave Ford about the detached. Did you have an opportunity to
I
do
have not
that?
gotten anything concrete from Dave Ford on that, no.
You would?
I haven't gotten anything concrete from Dave Ford on that, but I will touch base before the next meeting.
Okay, well, I think that's important, because I'm sure it will come up. So what's the next step, then? You're going to do another version here?
I'm going to revise based on tonight's discussion, have council review that revised language, and then come back to the board so you can think about your forum.
Okay. When do we want to have this? Would mid-August be okay? How does everybody feel about that? The work session in
My
August?
suggestion is it should happen while all the seasonal folks are
Yeah,
here.
before Labor Day.
That would be good.
Right. Okay, so
So I'll look for the August work session.
how are you going to be advertising this then?
If the board wants, I can put the forum in the paper on the website and get it out. I mean, if somebody has a personal Facebook page, I can share the link once that's created, et cetera, and move forward. The question I have is, does this board want to review the final revised language as discussed tonight before the notice goes out?
Yes.
Yes, well, if we're talking mid-August, there's time.
So I'll bring it back to the July meeting with attorney feedback on the changes as I understand them to date, and then we'll put a notice out after that for the August
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay, is that okay with everybody?
So what are we looking for a date?
Would be the 16th, August 16th, 8/16/22.
That's the Tuesday.
Okay, and what about John's suggestion of providing some data?
I will bring data back to the next meeting, or
Okay,
the next work session.
okay.
I haven't quite understood what that shows, but we can discuss that further on the 27th.
The 27th of what? Did he just say 20?
The short-term rental discussion we're going to have on the 27th, we can touch on that.
Okay, okay, all right. Very good. Okay. All right, so on to the next. It's inclusionary, our inclusionary zoning.
So we're going to start
Amendments.
advertising for the forum right away?
I don't
No,
want to start advertising to the
Until-
forum
yeah.
until the board agrees on the language at the
Right.
July meeting,
But we know when the date's going to be, so.
unless it needs to move after feedback from council or the board on July.
Well, if we move it any past that date, people will be going home, so we got to be committed here. Seriously.
I'm not going to put a notice in the paper until closer to the 16th, but if board members want to start communicating to the public that there will be a forum on detached ADUs on August 16th, I don't see any harm in that. If that's up to the board, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, now, are you going to, when you bring it back to us, will the definitions be included in this?
Well, there are no definitions that would be included in this. Those
Yeah,
are,
yes, there are. There are some suggestions that we're going to put in the definitions.
if you want the definitions to be included in the forum, that can be part of the forum discussion, yes. As far as ADUs go, the only thing that changes is moving the definition of ADU out of the ADU section and putting it in definitions. And then the short-term rental suggestion will be
Right.
coming back in the definition section.
And the conditional zoning.
Conditional
permit.
use permit doesn't relate specifically to ADUs, but conditional
Yeah.
use permit will be added to 175, yes.
Okay, but we need it as part of this ADU discussion. That needs to be presented so that people will understand what it is we're trying to do.
Yep, They can be available for that, yes.
Okay. All right, so it will be the ADU ordinance with the definition attached, right?
As discussion points for the public.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay. All right, very good. Inclusionary zoning.
Similar to ADU, I gave you a red line strike through, the only reason it's 7 pages long, and then the same with the changes accepted. I believe everything is the same as before. Doug did point out a typo on page 2, dealing with the appeal. There's an as-it that needs to come out.
Where?
Middle of page 2 of the red line.
Red line.
Any person aggrieved by a planning board decision, appeal of the decision by the planning board arising from provisions of this article lies with the appropriate superior court, NHRSA 676:5, Roman 3, or New Hampshire Housing Appeals Board, New Hampshire RSA 679:5, 1Q, close parens, as it removes, but cannot be appealed to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, RSA 676:5 et sec.
Okay,
Other than that, I believe this is everything that has been
Yeah, you included the community well language,
correct.
so that's good.
So I have a question on that, that you just mentioned, Mike. So in 175-31, where it reads, "A site plan or subdivision plan can mix affordable housing types and accumulate density bonuses." In number 1, it says municipal sewer and water are available, or 2, a New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services approved community well and septic is proposed. Is there a possibility that you could have municipal water and septic, or a well and sewer, rather than just only city or only private?
I think that falls within the realm of the board to be able to understand that any combination of 1 or 2 would be fine.
Okay.
I mean, it could say either 1 or 2, comma, or combination thereof, comma, however, all other, because those do exist in town. There are sites that have water but no sewer, but I originally drafted community well and/or septic, and that might address that. So-
okay. I still have some concern because we haven't really talked about the manufactured housing community ordinance as it stands. And I think we need to do that before we include that here. And.
Well, the way it would apply right now is somebody would still be held to the manufactured housing overlay density.
Okay, but I think we need to discuss it in terms of the ordinance that exists now for manufactured housing, so that everybody understands what we're doing.
I don't understand currently.
Okay, well, I think we've talked about the elderly housing community and workforce housing. We're going to talk about multifamily housing projects. Isn't that on the agenda? And we still haven't talked about the manufactured housing community and the open space cluster subdivision. Isn't that one of the ordinances that you brought to us a while ago?
I brought it to some, but not all of the board, yes. And there was discussion at the last meeting about using the same term, conservation subdivision, to sound less.
Grape Lake.
Okay.
What?
Grape Lake.
Ah. So I think the way it's worded right now, if somebody is proposing a manufactured housing community, under the manufactured housing overlay, you're required at least whatever the base zone requires for each lot that a manufactured unit is on.
Okay, well, I'm not suggesting we talk about it here now. I think we need some to be put on the agenda and then talk about it. Okay, that was all I was suggesting
Have,
before we move ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have we finished our discussion of 17531 and the municipal, community well, et cetera, et cetera?
To address Doug's point, I think it would be cleaner if it said "or two, a New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services approved community well and/or septic,"
And/or?
and/or would address that. If
Another
the
subject.
board would prefer, I don't see any reason removing, for the time, manufactured housing or open space cluster from this. Or we have a discussion on what's happening with either or both of those. As I read this, it really doesn't matter what manufactured or open space cluster / conservation say. This ordinance simply provides a 15% density increase to what the regulations currently state if you include affordable units.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tavis.
The other thing I'm concerned about is 17532, where we talk about to ensure that the application is complete as permitted, the dwelling qualified as affordable housing shall be made available for occupancy. It says on approximately the same schedule. I think it needs to say at the same time. I don't know why we would do that. I mean,
That's what it says now.
yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Kathy, to continue on for the sentence you were just describing, it finishes, or it continues to say the same schedule as the project's market units, or I think it should say the project's market rate units. I think the word rate is missing there.
At the same time,
Market rate.
at the same time, on approximately the same schedule would allow for supply chain issues for getting the affordable housing units there in time. And so, you know, how stringent do you want to be? If all of a sudden some, you know, higher-end houses show up and the other guys didn't, do we dock these people, or how do we deal with that?
No, I think I agree. We need to allow them some flexibility.
Yeah, I agree, too.
I would say marketed rate for the units.
Well, you're talking about projects market rate units, the units that are at market rate, I think.
Marketed rate for the units.
Well, market rate units means the same thing, John, it's just a little cleaner. I think throwing the word rate in the middle would work. I would support the idea of retaining approximately to give us some flexibility. Give the project some flexibility.
And I think the board would have I think the board under this has every ability to say, what is your schedule for completion of units? And the board needs to determine if it is or is not approximately the same schedule.
Yes,
I
that's,
mean, it's almost inconceivable where someone is going to build an entire project and wait for all of them to be completed and say, we now have market rate and affordable units.
well, I think what you get is you get somebody that builds them in the fall and then builds them in the spring, and then by the springtime, it's not a marketed rate at the fall's price.
I also think the intent of this paragraph is to not let somebody build 90% of their units, i.e. all the market rate ones, and then see how the market fares or what happens in the economy before they put in the affordable.
And then the other ones never get built.
Correct.
Right, like they should build one and then build the other, and then build two more of those and then build two more of those, not,
I mean, functionally
16
speaking,
to
all of the
1.
units are exactly the same, other than the rate that is charged to
Yeah,
the tenant, so.
Cost you're charging.
Okay, so we done with that because then the next aftermarket rate units, it says, except that the certificate of occupancy for the last 10% of the market rate unit shall be withheld until the certificate of occupancy have been issued for all affordable housing. So, I mean, I just don't know why we're, not saying that the affordable housing unit shouldn't be built right along with everybody else. I don't get that.
Well, I think they are,
I mean,
because I
that's
think
what this is all about, isn't it?
the concern about, well,
No,
I think that
it's-
what it's all about is trying to get affordable units.
Yes, this is an incentive ordinance,
Well,
not
right.
not a market control ordinance.
So my read of this is that approximately the same schedule is ultimately governed by the next statement, that certificates for the last 10% of the market rate are withheld until all of the affordable are complete. So approximately the same schedule has some more levity as long as now, keep in mind, in most of the town, we're talking about a difference of 1 or 2 units. I mean, we're not talking about, 50 out of 150 units here.
Yeah,
We're
I just
talking
don't know
about,
why they can't all be treated the same, I guess.
I think
Well,
that's
it
what
just-
this is trying to do.
And it just holds them
Yeah.
accountable to finish that last low-income one,
Okay,
or they
but
finish the
I,
rest of it.
but I do know that certificate of occupancies can be a conditional certificate, and that could go on for quite some time. So that's what my concern is.
I can, if the board wants, I can work with council on how that gets worded
Yeah,
to button that up, if there's room to button that up.
oh, okay, all right, that would be,
I just want to make one other point, because Tavis had just mentioned that the market rate units and the affordable units would be the same units, but just sold at different prices. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Yeah. So this reads that the affordable housing shall be compatible in architectural style and appearance with the market rate dwellings, not identical, but compatible. And I was involved with a development in New Jersey some years ago where they had built townhouses, and across the driveway from the townhouses were the carriage houses, where they had a garage for each of the townhouses. And above the garages, there were the affordable apartments. So they were certainly not the same style. The buildings were of similar architectural design, but the affordable ones were apartments over the garage, whereas the full market rate got regular condominiums, townhouses.
I imagine the appliances were different, the countertops were different.
Yes, certainly the finishes were all cheaper. Yeah, yeah. So it's just another way of approaching this that we should be aware of.
I never read it that they should be identical.
No,
I
I'm
didn't
just-
see
I'm
that
just-
in here anywhere.
Nor did I,
Yeah.
which is why I'm pointing out, because that's what Tavis has just mentioned. So I just want to make clear that I don't expect that they would be identical.
That just goes to the point that anybody can get creative in doing any of these projects. I think it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good example.
okay, but right now, we're talking about everything being the same. None of the, I mean, no apartments.
I don't think we are talking about everything being the same.
No.
No.
But I think
I don't see
that's
anywhere
what
in
it's-
here that it says everything has to be the same.
But
Okay,
it's-
well, then it should be.
It just says that the lower income ones need to be finished first.
Right.
I
before
don't
the
think,
last
it's-
big
I don't
ones.
think it's realistic
All
for
right, well, I
someone
guess
to.
I was going under the assumption that everything was going to be the same.
And Kathy, that's why I'm making it clear that I don't think that they would be. In this instance, certainly if I was buying a market rate one with a garage and a townhouse, and a carriage house across the street, I would expect my garage to be available at the same time I buy my townhouses. So certainly that other building, in my example, would be finished on approximately the same schedule.
Yeah, I think Kathy is saying that the image of the one building is the exact same as the image of the other building.
Yeah.
And I think we're having a difference of,
In materials as well?
well, the
Materials
look,
and finish?
the look of the building would be the same as the look of the other building. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
That's just a condominium block, that's not a neighborhood.
well, she's providing a image of a concept that she's thinking about as we draw this up. And I think what Doug just pointed out was that there's possibilities for other concepts that may mirror this concept that we're trying to put forth here. And to keep everybody spurred on, there's different ideas out there that will do what we want it to do.
It could also be, John, you've got 4 and 5 bedroom homes over here, and you've got 2-bedroom homes interspersed within them.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, they're not gonna be
There are
identical.
many different ways to solve the problem.
So how do you
I
think about
think-
this, Kathy?
I think that
functionally-
they all should be the same, is what I think.
I functionally think all of the effort that went into inclusionary, because no one has yet to pick up on inclusionary to move forward, is going to fall on its face if the regulations read that every unit has to be exactly the same.
It won't happen. I don't think they'll get any of them built, but if they can build smaller units or less fancy units, they will get built.
But they have to be architecturally compatible.
Yeah,
And you don't have to put the granite tabletops in.
not the same, but there.
Like a neighborhood, like,
Yeah.
you know, a bunch of
Do they
condos all
say-
put together.
I
Do
think
they
that-
say it to be architecturally compatible?
17532, the dwellings qualifying as affordable housing shall be compatible in architectural style and appearance with the market rate dwellings in the proposed development.
All right. So there's no
The
social-
affordable unit should be interspersed throughout the overall development. The structures must also include energy-efficient construction that will ensure long-term affordable annual operation.
There's no social stigma attached to
Right, you
the
can't,
affordable units compared to
Yeah,
the
okay.
market rate
that's-
unit.
That's what I'm concerned
It
about.
just may mean
Okay.
that the two-bedroom home doesn't have a garage.
I mean, you may not get granite countertops in the affordable units, but at least they'll look identical on the
Yeah,
outside.
right.
So there'll be no stigma attached. I see where you're going.
no, I mean, that's what it has said since day one with this.
So where do we stand on this one then?
As written,
Well, we've got a review by council 17532.
Yeah,
Kathy wanted
I've got
that.
nothing.
And I think we should just look at the manufactured housing. I mean, I've never looked at the project for that.
I will bring.
So I don't think anybody else has, unless
I will
Ron
bring
has.
to the July meeting copies of manufactured housing overlay district and conservation subdivision with my thoughts and suggestions on moving forward.
Okay, that would be great. Okay,
Thank you, Tavis.
okay.
I have a question about 17535. Administration compliance monitoring, the article should be administered by the Wolfeboro Planning Board. What is the mechanism by which we're going to monitor the
Yes.
future liens that are, or the future idea that these affordable units continue to be affordable?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Peter.
There are
I
parts
had a
here that
question
said
here.
New Hampshire Housing and Finance Authority or something here.
That was in the original ordinance, and it had never been
Right.
confirmed by the New Hampshire Housing Alliance whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, the owner of
It's
a
in
project
there.
containing affordable units for rent shall prepare an annual report due on June 30, certifying that the gross rents of the affordable units and the household income of the tenants of affordable units have been maintained in accordance with this article. Such report should be submitted to the New Hampshire Finance. So functionally, what that means is you have to have us report by June 30 to submit to the financing authority. They have, in order to qualify for affordable, they have to go through the financing authority. So what this ordinance is saying under 17535 paragraph 2 is simply that the report is due by June 30 to help make sure they're in compliance. If they're not, we stick the state on them.
Okay, well, in 175-35, the first thing it says is that the article shall be administered by the Wolfeboro Planning Board. Now, how are we going to be, we're going to be looking at people's income that's being proposed
is
for
a
these? I mean,
That would be
how-
the
what does-
housing
What does
authority.
this mean? That,
You should say the
This-
housing
This
authority.
means that projects that are requesting inclusionary zoning, i.e. Article 5, would be reviewed and effectively approved by the planning board. That's all that says.
says
But
administered.
monitoring is a word here.
It does say administered, I beg pardon.
The last paragraph in that introduction says ongoing responsibility for monitoring will be with the responsibility of the New Hampshire Housing Authority.
Yeah, but do they know that?
But, yeah, right, I
Yes.
mean, that's my next issue.
Because that's where the affordable housing money comes from. People aren't really just charging less and doing affordable housing units. They're getting a subsidy to do the affordable units. And in order to qualify for the subsidy, you have to go through the housing
I
authority.
understand that. Is all of the administrative mechanism in place for their oversight?
How
Once
about
we-
this article should be administered by the Wolfeboro Planning Board or their designee? I mean, this is what it said for just short of eons here.
Yeah, well, that was the problem. It should not have said that for eons because,
Well, it worked because no one did it. But, I mean,
Well,
I don't mean to poke.
But we're looking at it again, and we'd like to change it.
Okay.
That's all.
I will review that with council to make sure those
Okay,
are dotted.
and I'm also concerned about New Hampshire housing. So, I mean, you know, I don't think they do this type of thing. I don't think. Maybe they do.
I will reach out to Housing Authority and Council and have
Yeah,
175.
and because I mean, well, hang on just a sec, because it says, or another designee identified by the planning board, so we could put in another, or, you know, just say that the responsibility has to be by someone that does the affordable housing, like Hodges does it for Harriman Hill.
True, or it could be WEDCO in
And so
certain instances.
if we could
so-
put some wording in like that, but, and then we could, that could be part of the application, okay?
Is the incentive money tied up, into a bank or something that keeps track of this? You know, when you go through the whole process, I'm a builder, I'm going through the whole
It's
process.
not really the
I'm gonna
money
do it.
that's tied up. There has to be a double check that somebody that's in the affordable unit qualifies under the definition of affordable.
So somebody's going to back check the people, okay.
Correct.
And there are groups that do that type of thing, but you'd have to make arrangements with them ahead of time, and I don't know if New
Well, I
Hampshire
just wondered-
Housing does that or
I just
not.
wondered if you could, as a builder, even get money to do this without having that third party already part of your business plan.
I'm sure it's possible to do that, sure.
Peter,
The
did you?
question is, you approve this density increase because you agreed to certain terms. Are you honoring those terms? I don't know what I mean, the bigger question is, what if somebody doesn't honor the terms? Are we going to take over the project? Are we going to say you can't
No, I don't
occupy those
think we.
units?
I don't think we can.
So
I mean, I don't.
that's why I rather quickly said, let's have council look at this and figure out what the current triggering mechanism is.
Yeah, right. Go ahead, Peter.
I have a question, and sometimes my brain doesn't work well, but we have somebody who's in the affordable housing because they didn't have a whole lot of money, and that was because they had some young kids, and so there was only one breadwinner.
Kids leave and they get a raise.
Kids
and they
leave,
don't
now you end up
qualify.
having an increase in the amount of money which is coming in, and they no longer are in that economic area. What happens to those people? Are they evicted from their house?
My guess would be it would follow the lease term. My guess is it would follow the lease term, but that's a legal question.
Anyway, but that's something which, you know, it's like, does that mean that they basically can't live in the house anymore, or is it?
I qualified until February when I won the scratch-off ticket. Now I have to move. I mean, I don't know what happens. I will find answers to things like
Okay,
that.
but that's one of those, it's like, that's not fair, that's whatever, or maybe you exchange houses or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are a couple questions like that probably
Yeah,
need to
'cause I
be
could see
addressed.
that, you know, that their lease would go up because things would change, but then all of a sudden now that's not a low-income unit anymore if they're paying more.
you'll be presenting this to council?
Yeah, okay, that would be great. Okay, anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I have one more question. On 17533, at the bottom of the first section, it reads, "Affordable housing rental units shall limit annual rent increases to the percentage increase in the area median income, except to the extent that further increases are made necessary by hardship or other unusual conditions." And I'm wondering who determines what is a hardship or unusual condition?
Administered by the planning board.
There you go, okay.
That's why it's dangerous. That's why we get council to look at it.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't be surprised if when you get, you know, a lease, some of this stuff is like other things that you do for daycare, you know, that you got to reapply every year. You got to hand in your taxes every year. You got to fill out the form every year. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if some of it gets tied up like that.
Okay, well, so next step is you're going to have our attorney take a look at it. I mean, you know, the only reason we're going through this is that we're all going to have to explain it to our fellow citizens in March.
At the
Well, our
same-
chairperson certainly is going to have to explain it to our fellow citizens, isn't she?
Well, I think
At the same-
everybody will
at the same
be.
time-
Well, we'll be following behind your lead, you.
I don't think the planning board needs to bind itself down by having to review annual income statements or things like that, nor does staff necessarily need to do that. The way I read that originally was the town needs to make sure that the planning board approval has been complied with. And whether that's the housing authority or WEDCO or somebody else, somebody has to determine that, yes, it appears in the year 2023, so-and-so rented their affordable units to income-qualified individuals. I'm realistically looking for an email that comes from the right person saying, yes,
Yeah.
they've complied.
Yeah,
I just need to make sure it says that to the right degree. But I also think it behooves the board to find out what happens if they say, oh, no, they didn't. And what do we do with that? So, but I
okay.
will try and get some of those answers.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, the multifamily,
Well, multifamily, the next thing you had in your packet has multifamily at the end of it. But what I did with this is tried to give the board a sense of, in addition to ADU and inclusionary, this is a series of potential warrant articles. So starting with accessory building or structure, the board discussed at the last meeting
Where are you, Tavis, please?
this document.
Okay.
Under accessory building or structure, originally I had proposed removing the half bath on the ground floor. I don't want to get into that tonight, so I simply left the 2 question marks in there because the board wanted to discuss that further at a later date. What I did add was under the exemptions, if you will, accessory dwelling units. Kathy emailed and recommended that that say detached accessory dwelling units.
yeah, so accessory yes, right.
So I have no problem with that.
Okay,
swimming
and so the
pools-
accessory building structure shall be limited to a single half bath, that is off.
I left it alone because the group sounded like they want to talk about it. So if there's no
Well-
further discussion on it, it just stays. That's why I put the question marks. So
Okay,
the only real change to look at is swimming pools, tennis courts, and like outdoor residential sports facilities, comma, well houses, comma, dog houses, comma, septic systems, comma, detached accessory dwelling units, comma, and parking areas. That's the change. The next one down on that page is simply cutting and pasting accessory dwelling unit from 57.1 into 175, 175. It is modified as previously discussed to include attached or detached. Under that is what I heard the board agreeing on, the short-term rental with a slight tweak, as I suggested earlier. The use of a residential housing unit for rental occupancy for a period of less than 31 days or 1 month, whichever is less. Affordable housing is a definition that came out of inclusionary, simply moved into 175, 175 with a statutory reference. And there's some strike through on the next page, second line down is a change to shorefront residential, which is making it look consistent with all the other zones
wait
under.
wait a minute, I think, could we put that on a separate agenda, because I...
What's that?
The shorefront, because when we brought it up before, Vaughn and John, I had asked them to take a look at the ordinance and see if they had any other changes, because they were on the committee. There was,
What committee?
and so if we could put
Used to
that
be a
on
shorefront.
a separate agenda where it says shorefront, right? Okay.
Yeah, my point here was only to offer this because we have an error in the ordinance where shorefront is the only one that doesn't allow an ADU, which we know is required by right, by the statute. So this change specifically in 175-65 is simply to have shorefront residential read exactly like every other zone that allows a single detached dwelling by adding a single detached dwelling per lot with one accessory dwelling unit. So that was the only one there. The question mark for me is the next one down, is simply removing the word stormwater management from the term because we now have stormwater management plans through the stormwater regulations that this board did not feel applied here.
Okay, again, could we have this as a separate agenda item at a future meeting?
Sure.
Just so
I
that.
don't know what the discussion is, but I can put it on the next workshop.
Well,
on the agenda,
they
but
may
then nothing to worry
have
about.
some other thoughts that we want to include in this. That was the only thing that I was concerned about. And Vaughn and John, if you would kind of take a look and see if you have any thoughts, since we've lived with this for a while, of changes that should be made. I mean, the one I had circled is the 1% reduction of lot coverage. After it's 175-67C, the second paragraph. Yes, I know, but we may want to talk about it again.
Yeah, we didn't come up to a conclusion.
Right, okay. Okay, all right, sorry.
So, no,
Sorry,
that's fine.
Tavis.
I'll move that to the July work session. The next
Yeah.
thing down is multifamily. Understand that my recommendation is to move everything that follows from the bottom of page 2 into page 3 into the respective zones instead of having a standalone section at 175, 143, and 144 and 145 that talks about specific zones. My suggestion is to put multifamily in VRR, GR, and all commercial districts, so that when somebody is going through each particular zone, it's very clear that multifamily is allowed. The reason I suggest that is if you pull out the residential district right now, just by itself, that chapter, nowhere does it say multifamily is allowed. You have to know somehow that 175, 144 actually allows multifamily. So my thought is simply to move, in the instance of 175, 144, A, B, C, and D, appropriately into the respective zones, VR, R, GR, Bay Street Limited, Wolfeboro Falls, et cetera.
You're just trying to make everything match, right?
Trying to make everything match without someone having, a layperson specifically having to know that, oh, there's another section 45 pages later that has a whole new set of rules.
This way you'll have everything in one place.
No, we don't.
We would if,
You're going to put this into each.
that's the suggestion, if the board is okay with moving in that direction.
You want to have it spread over in the various
Yeah,
zones where it's allowed.
right.
In
Yeah.
terms of a warrant article, that sounds like a lot, sounds like we're going to have a change for every zone. What it would look like, if you remember the 2020 ballot where the parking or the architectural design standards changed throughout, that is what this warrant article would look like.
Okay, so it is doable then?
It's very doable. I just don't want to go through the work of orchestrating it if the board would prefer to have a section on multifamily dwellings.
I thought that was
Yeah.
the original intent
Right.
of the board, take all of our various multifamily
Right.
dwellings,
Correct.
merge them into one.
So to that end, one of the inconsistencies I see in the regulation is the bottom of page 2, simply multifamily dwellings are permitted. More than one building may be permitted on a lot of record. That puts a bunch of things together. I do not understand any justification behind limiting someone to 5 dwelling units per building. The reason I say that is if somebody were proposing a hotel, they can go up to 50 rooms. The only difference between a 50-room hotel and a 50-unit apartment building is the kitchen in each unit. So that, to me, the regulation is inconsistent. If you have multifamily, you can only have 5 per building, but if you do a hotel, you can have 50.
Does anybody on the board with institutional memory remember why that 5 dwelling units was put in there?
Yes, because it used to say 4. And, well,
That's how we
and we upped it to 5 when the state passed the affordable housing
Right.
regulation, so that's how.
So if the board
got
would
there.
prefer a limitation, that's fine. Keep in mind, just because you don't have that limitation doesn't mean somebody automatically gets 50. You're still limited to, in this case, 2 units per acre.
So is there any difference in criteria for a 50-unit building rather than a 5-unit building?
Parking.
All sorts of building codes.
Yeah, right, right, yeah, a lot of building codes.
Just trying to reverse engineer and think of why it was just 5 and not 50.
Well, I mean, Vaughn says building codes, but once you have 3, you trigger fire sprinklers and all sorts of things. I don't know if that goes up again if you go to 50.
Well, you have to have egress, places of assembly, you have to have fire partitions. There's a bunch of things.
Okay, but that's not a zoning thing.
No, it's a code thing.
Right.
So what if a multifamily was 15?
Functionally speaking, I don't think there's but 3 lots in town that would ever have more than 6.
Okay? So
But my
it's not what we're
suggestion,
talking about.
my suggestion is simply that 5 is a very arbitrary number. I know how 4 became
right.
5,
Okay?
but
Now
if you can have
Now you
a,
know why that happened.
but if you can have a 50-unit hotel, that's a certain size structure. What is inherently different other than transitory population? What is the difference? Anyway, similarly, under B, density shall not exceed 2 units per acre for lots served by both municipal water and sewer, and I carried through the idea of community well and/or septic. That actually says and/or right now.
I like the idea of multifamily dwellings are permitted, period. Remove the limitation of 5, because it is arbitrary.
There were other things going over to page 3. So you already allowed 2 units per acre, but then under D2, there's a reference to an additional 7,260 square feet per dwelling unit. I don't understand how that math follows. If you're allowed 2 per acre, how can you then require the second unit to have an additional square footage? Now, one of the things that
Wait, which section are you talking about, conversion of
conversion of an existing single-family
existing?
residence.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So, conversion of an existing single-family residence, that means there is a lot that already has a structure on it, and somehow in order to get the second unit, you need another 7,260 square feet. Somehow that doesn't follow if you're on an acre. And the reason I say that is with none of the multifamily in Wolfeboro is there an open space requirement. Many ordinances say, if you're in multifamily, we understand that everybody's going to be packed together in a building, if you will, where in the single family, we require 1 acre for a unit. So that's arguably 3/4 of an acre per residential unit of open space. We have no open space requirement for multifamily in Wolfeboro. It's just something to think about. That's originally what I thought that intent was, but that's not what it says.
It's not as if we're in an urban condition, though, so there's plenty of open space around to go to.
Well, that's how I got to the strikeout. It just
Yeah.
didn't make sense. If you're allowed 2 per acre and you're on an acre, you get 2 units when you convert a structure. You shouldn't have to be held to finding another 7,260 square feet.
There's also, I believe Wolfeboro Falls allows 2-family dwellings. There are some specific zones that had certain
Well,
other,
that's a later agenda item. We have many zones that say on any lot, you're allowed a single family with ADU, or a duplex. And then later it says you need an additional ½ acre for each unit. But you've already permitted it. You can't have more than 2. Where's that square footage come in? So I'm just trying to hit the easy cleanup first and explain where it's coming from. I cannot find a clear nexus on where the 7,260 square feet comes from. I'm happy to dig into it. I don't necessarily think it's relevant to do the work because you're already converting an existing structure, which is on an existing lot. Holding them to require additional lot size doesn't seem to further the housing needs. Just a thought.
It's already existing. There's no point to getting more.
Correct. So then down to number 4.
Well, before we move on,
Yep.
Tavis, in D1, in the first line, just I guess a typo you might call it, where it reads, be converted to up to multiple.
Converted to multiple dwelling units.
Then you're going to 4, I believe.
And then 4, such conversions, I don't care, it doesn't matter how many units, once you 3 or more units is superfluous, because you have to have 3 or more to be multifamily. So once you convert to multifamily, it's a change of use and
Yeah.
require a site plan review.
That's good.
And then functionally speaking, everything in 175-45 is the same, other than the density per acre.
Yeah.
I tried to
Yeah.
be consistent with those
Can we
changes.
add Bay Street to that?
That was a question, because when the board originally talked about density, considering CBD going to 30 units per acre, there's a lot of discussion. One of the reasons I didn't put Bay Street down there for now is that there was at least public comment at that time that Bay Street should be treated differently than CBD. So there's the giant floating question mark. Functionally speaking, I don't see a zoning distinction. There's a current structured distinction, but there's not a zoning distinction between Wolfeboro Falls, Bay Street, CBD, et cetera. They are the water sewer served districts. So I think the board needs to be very articulate about what changes the density limitation. Keep in mind, the parcel size increases in Bay Street.
Yeah.
So if Bay Street is in 175, 145, and you move it to 6 units per acre, you are going to see, or are more likely to see, a spike in multifamily units in Bay Street.
That's what I worry about by including Bay Street.
Yeah.
Wolfeboro Falls, I don't see much of a line there. I mean, functionally, the last acreage over 1 in Wolfeboro Falls is currently being contemplated to be a park. So there's not going to be a lot of multifamily unit demand in Wolfeboro Falls.
So what concern would you have, Mike, on Bay Street if you had multifamily?
Change in the neighborhood, because right now it's single-family with exception of the Taylor home and the park, and then a little bit of commercial up towards the end. I think if you allow multifamily and the lot size, as Tavis pointed out, is larger, and you do get multifamily in there, that entire area is going to start changing in appearance. You're also going to be, I mean, one side of it is directly on Back Bay, with fairly expensive lot costs. You're going to be changing, you're just basically going to be changing the character of the neighborhood, and I'm not sure we're ready for that yet.
Well, and to follow up on that, I think the intent of the way this is worded right now is that multifamily belongs right downtown. And by lot size, it's not likely to
Ever be there.
occur as often right downtown. The lot size in Bay Street would allow it, and if the intent was originally to put them over there, and by switching Bay Street Limited, you've now moved all the now, it's all within walking distance, it's all within water and sewer, there's just a lot of, I think there's very clear intention on CBD and Wolfeboro Falls being treated differently from Bay Street. But I don't disagree with the notion that Bay Street should be afforded more than 2 units per acre. I don't know what the number is. If you'd like, I can look at what's in Bay Street Limited as far as lot sizes and how many have singles or doubles now and how many more units are we really talking about.
Yeah, you really need to look at how many units you're really talking about, because a lot of construction's happened lately.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of small lots left. And those small lots look tiny from the road, but they go way down, and they've been turned into very nice homes.
I can see increasing density to 2 units per, but I would be concerned about putting multifamily in as an allowance at this stage.
Yeah, I just look at the, what's going on in the neighborhood. I think what's going to happen is you're going to get full blowout because you got Taylor Home is expanding rapidly in that neighborhood. And I think The size of a single family is going to just be outdwarfed by the mega Taylor home, and I think the mid-range, I believe, is going to be a nice multifamily integration in there, and I really don't see a problem with it myself.
Well, if you get multifamily in those really long million-dollar lots,
Yeah.
where they're bordering the bay, all of a sudden you've got all of the elements that you were concerned about before with accessory dwelling units that are detached. You've got more asphalt on the ground, you've got more runoff into Back Bay, you've got more septic going into the town sewer, you've got a bigger, stronger impact on the use of the land.
Mine is the road bit. That road is so narrow.
And the road is difficult, too. I see where you're going, John, and I appreciate that may well be inevitably where we're going, but I'd like to see it start small.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I would rather go with CBD and Wolfeboro Falls, and then later on, if we think about it more.
How many units are in the
then add Bay
condominium?
Street.
Anyone know how many units are in the condo on Bay Street?
In the what?
The condo unit is actually on filter bed, but now it's,
Oh, not very many, like 4.
I think there's 2 sections there, 4 apiece.
Yeah, I think it's 4, only 4. There's not very many.
Evans
well,
Brothers
depending on what
built
lot
those.
size it is, that might be suggestive on where the density needs to be in Bay Street. I know the condo isn't in Bay Street, but it's in the neighborhood of Bay Street.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
They're a lot
don't-
smaller than I thought they were when I drove in.
I don't see that there's ever been a problem with that building development there.
I'll look at the density and the lot size on the condo and come up with some acreages in Bay Street and see where we end up. I'm going to discount the town-owned parcels and the land bank parcels
Yep.
because those are just going to distort the numbers. But
Taylor
then,
home.
but there's existing single-family or single-story commercial, providing them the incentive to put apartment or 2 upstairs. It's definitely going to push on 2 units an acre. 6 might be too much, but I'll give you some numbers to look at.
And I'm curious, with some of these 175, 145, CBD, Wolfeboro Falls, maybe Bay Street, that you can't change the building? You can't add on to the building to accommodate an additional unit?
That's conversion.
So let's say it's a single family or a single business and they want to convert it to a multifamily. Why can't you add on to the building?
I think you can, but you have to go to site plan review. The way I read this is if you have the acreage and you can convert within and not change the exterior, that's a building permit. If you
And
change
what-
the exterior, you trigger site plan.
That's fine, but why would we continue to require a special exception here?
yeah, I had that mark, too. I was
Wait a minute, I tried to
wondering
get-
about that.
You have a question mark after it, well, obviously.
Oh, because I'm going to leave it to you guys, whether you want to leave yet another public hearing in there or not. I will say statistically, wherever there is something like that in Wolfeboro, the ordinance says by special exception, just to add another review.
Oh.
I put a question mark where I don't necessarily believe it's
Well, if you're,
appropriate.
but if we're now requiring site plan review anyway,
That's
Big
enough.
difference between site plan and a special exception. Special exception to me invokes something that is proposed for a neighborhood that is atypical with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, Tavis, if I understood what you said, if the building can be converted without changing the exterior, it only requires a special exception?
What it says right now is conversion of an existing dwelling, existing residential dwellings may, by special exception, be converted to up to 4 dwelling units, provided that the conversion is contained within the existing structure and not part of a proposed addition necessitated by the conversion.
That's a very severe requirement, special exception.
Absolutely.
Something that makes no external change.
So my recommendation would be existing residential buildings may be converted to multifamily dwellings, provided the conversion is contained within the existing.
But then read the following sentence. Such conversion shall be considered a change of use and require site plan review?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and I'm loose on that. I'm trying to be consistent with what the earlier ordinance says.
Do we,
The town historically has wanted site plan review where, remember, you can't require site plan review if it's not multifamily. So it's not single family, or it has to be commercial or multifamily to trigger site plan review.
Okay,
But not here. You're converting just an existing dwelling. Let's say you're taking a 1 to a 2.
But it's becoming,
Multifamily.
you have to become multifamily to trigger site plan review.
But if you're going from 1 to 2, you don't trigger.
It's not multifamily, correct?
I don't read that to say that.
That's part of the definition, I believe. It has to be 3 or more to be multifamily.
Correct. Yes, if you have a single now and you, by density, you're allowed 2, it's
2.
just a building permit, have a nice day.
is site plan review sufficient oversight?
For 5 units,
No, 3 or more.
For multi-
3 or more.
If it's not granted,
That's when you get to look at parking layout,
Yeah.
stormwater, architectural.
Neighborhood impact?
No, it's a site
No, I
plan.
know, it's not neighborhood impact.
I think neighborhood impact is why special exception is there, but I guess my question is rather generic. Why would you propose that a use could go in there if you believed it warranted a special exception?
Yeah, I understood there's no change to the exterior, so you don't need.
2 units in a house is not arguably going to have a different impact than 1 family in a house.
And you're already on sewer and water.
Correct.
And you've got parking covered. So, okay, fine.
So,
Okay,
those-
so we're taking out special exception, but there is a change of use in site plan review.
if you hit 3 or more, you hit site plan, yes. Because realistically, if you require a project to get both a special exception and the site plan, when somebody's only going to get 1 additional unit to start with based on lot size, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
So
Okay,
what,
and-
so what do you think it costs somebody to go from that next hurdle? Somebody wants to go from 2 to multifamily to convert over.
They have to sprinkle the building. It's substantial, potentially substantial. I mean, you don't have
What
to
what
sprinkle.
tipped that? Was that the fire code?
Yes. Multifamily is sprinkled construction,
And that's at 3?
3 or more. Once you hit 3 or more, you move out of IRC into IBC, and you get the full weight of the big book.
Is that total units? Does that include commercial units?
Well, that's 2 different occupancies. That also triggers.
So you got 4 in a building, that automatically goes ding, sprinkle it.
As soon as you have a retail and a residence, you trigger IBC.
Really?
That's my understanding. I'm not the building official. I have to put the asterisks at the bottom.
Yeah.
I play one on TV, but not.
We're in an old building, yeah.
Stated a holiday express on that.
Okay, so what's the next step here?
I'm going to make the revisions as discussed. I'll bring it back in July along with the shorefront for discussion, along with my anticipation is having ADU reviewed by council, et cetera, and then we'll be able to move on to other changes if you want. I did,
Okay, is everybody all set with this?
yep,
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you, Tavis. Okay, public comment, no one is here.
Other business?
And, yes, well, okay, you want to do that before minutes?
Yeah, we kind of have to. It's on the agenda.
Yeah, right, well,
Just
that's,
really briefly, that House omnibus bill that is being discussed now and has not yet been passed also includes a requirement that decisions by the planning board that deny an application have to include written reasons why. I think it also includes, if we approve an application, we have to provide written reasons why. We don't currently.
right, that's true, we do not.
That becomes effective July of next year. So my suggestion is maybe we ought to start practicing.
So does that mean that they get a
I think that's
letter?
a very good suggestion.
Does that mean that they get an extra letter? They don't just get,
No, it's all
Their
part of
permits?
the approval.
Yeah, part of the approval process, you're
So-
approved because.
What the notice of decision was read on such and so day, Julie Jacobs is approved for blah, 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 submitted on the plan, they're based on the following findings of fact
Yeah, you
and
have to have
conditions
findings
of
of fact.
approval.
Yeah,
But isn't that basically included in the minutes of our meeting?
Yes, but you have to actually, that's where zoning board, and again, I'm not an attorney, that's my double asterisk at the bottom, where ZBA decisions have historically been challenged, the court will typically look at the body of discussion to see if the board actually had discussions substantiating their, the ZBAs are supposed to be coming up with findings of fact anyway. Typically, it's couched on the discussion about, the 5 variance criteria, what have you. I don't have any problem working with the board on suggesting findings of fact as I suggest conditions. Where it gets a little tricky is if you ask me to come up with findings of fact to approve and findings of fact to deny. You don't want that in a document.
I think that we should be coming up with our own findings of fact after we have approved or denied, or during the approval and denial process.
Just before the, so,
You can massage them so that they're legible or grammatically accurate.
so what I'm accustomed to prior to New Hampshire is Mike Hodder makes a motion to approve the project as submitted, subject to the conditions of approval as attached in the planner's review based upon the findings of fact. Application comports with the zoning regulations as applicable to site plan, blah, blah, applicant has, and that's where it gets thrown in. You just have to get used to, when you make the motion, putting in those findings.
and this is a pretty common fact. I mean, this is
Yeah.
usually the way it's done.
But the other aspect is we used to, and I think we're going to work on getting the engineer's report that gives us their findings to substantiate the, all the stuff that
yeah,
goes into what the engineer would review before the applicant comes to the meeting.
And then there would be ways of finding of fact could be per the planner's review, parking, stormwater management, trash removal, engineer's report, all comport with finding of approval.
Right.
Something that we can find ways of
Yes, right.
doing in shorthand.
So then what happens to that piece of paper we just all agreed on? Does that go to the applicant? Does it
Becomes
get
part of the notice
filed?
of decision. It's all part of the motion.
Okay,
It becomes part of the permanent record.
and then it's just filed somewhere downstairs?
So it gets recorded at the county.
It's recorded.
So.
The idea is if they want to contest, then they say, look, he didn't say that.
Right, but it's like you've got a piece of paper, but if you just put it down there in the desk somewhere, nobody knows. I didn't know it got filed.
What
Yeah,
happens,
the applicant gets a copy of it, and it's in the file.
I like the idea of practicing.
May
Okay.
take a few months.
I like
All right,
practice.
practice makes perfect.
so
Okay.
you do have a couple of applications that will be coming to your next meeting. You will be having a site walk prior to your next meeting over on Forest Road. There's a special use permit request. Special use permit triggers a site walk. I've learned from past mistakes and have noticed the site walk for you. So what I can do in the next round of packets is include, along with the review, perhaps a findings of fact guidance document. So as you do your homework and look at the projects, you can I'm not going to say what they are. I'm going to suggest how to pull findings of fact as they relate to a potential action.
So what time's that site walk going to be?
6:30.
Can we do a walk at 6:30 and get here by 7? Is that little,
I hope so.
it's tiny?
Yeah,
I don't know.
You'll functionally be stopping in front of 127 Forest Road, looking at the front yard, not discussing the project, and then coming to a meeting.
Okay, we're not walking in the woods then.
Well, you're all going to be there, so it has to be noticed as a meeting.
yes, it will be. Yes,
Yes.
all right, yeah. John and I are used to doing this.
Yes. You write your questions down and bring them to the meeting, and then you ask them in front of everybody at the meeting.
Right. Okay, all right. So it will be, the meeting notice will say 6:30 Forest Road and then 7, yeah, okay, all right. Okay, any other business before we go into the minutes? Okay, May 17th, 2022, minutes.
Seconded?
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, very good. And the last one is June 7th, 2022.
Approve?
I'll second that. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, 2 abstentions. Okay, very good. All right. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Great, very good.